everybody.
How you
Dean
doing?
from Relix. I'm here with longtime Relix contributor Gary Kroman, who pretty much has been here from the very start. And we're going to talk about a new poster that he has in the works for Relix and just sort of walk a bit through his Relix career and some iconic things that he has done for Relix and just out there in the world above and beyond Relix. Gary, how are you?
Good, good.
Thank you. Thanks for tagging. Thanks for making the time. I mean, so even before Relics begins in 1974, at some point in that process, you met Les Capel and it all moves forward. But can you just talk a little bit about sort of your background, speaking both as an artist, but also as a music fan, and how the two of those may have entwined?
Well, I was living with a band, okay, and I guess I was the band artist in the early '70s, and so they did a gig in Brooklyn at a big park, and Les was there because a good friend of mine met him, and Les at the time was doing the newsletter, Relics newsletter about trading cassettes of Dead shows, and all Deadheads, and the band was a Grateful Dead kind of cover band. And he told us about them, and he came down to meet them and watch the band, met me, we started talking. And he asked me, and he saw my art, and he asked me if I could draw a northbound train through Colorado rain. So, yeah, of course I could do that. That's not hard. And he says, well, let me see, because I then he showed me the magazine. I didn't know about it, and I'd seen the first couple of covers that Jerry Moore did, who was his partner at the time. And I said, okay. And it was black and white news, just a newsletter, simple thing. And I gave him a black and white drawing, and he loved it. And he said, that's great. He says, we'll go forward. And then he just gelled from there.
In terms of you were living with this Grateful Dead cover band, so was it
Yeah.
fair to say that you'd been a fan of the good old Grateful Dead for a little while at that point?
Yeah, a long time. Yeah.
When did you? Can you recall your first
Oh,
show?
my first show. Actually, my first show was 73 or 2, was Jerry when he played with Hooterol. Howard Wales, I think is his name.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I saw the Dead in Washington at RFK Stadium with the Allman Brothers in the summer. Hot show, great show. I mean, and I'm like, that's it. I'm hooked. I'm done. That's all I gotta say. You know.
RFK shows are pretty iconic. I mean, Dakota Roll too is pretty like
Yeah,
in terms of your first two, that's pretty good.
yeah, yeah,
You
for
know.
sure.
And so how old how old were you at that time? Can you talk a little bit about your work as an artist? Thereabouts.
I must have been 15, maybe 16, the most. Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah. As a
So were you aspiring to become a professional artist at that point?
Oh
How did
yeah,
all
I was doing freelance illustrations and working for a couple of companies, as on retainer, t-shirts and stuff I would do for rock and roll and all that. And and once I got with Relics, and I was making the posters and all kinds of stuff that was being sold, locally.
as a teenager? You had some.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. It was great. It was pretty amazing. Yeah. And then I was learning to play music with the guys too. So then I started playing music and doing that, and at the same time, everything was working together.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? I'm just curious about you are a musician and how that sort of how that has come together, how that is reflected in your work, how you think that particular perspective infuses whatever it is that you do on the artistic on
Uh,
the illustration side.
yeah, the creative process is kind of like, it's interesting with being an artist. You do it alone, but when you're in a band, it's like being with a family and doing it together, creating. It's a it, it it's different than it's the same at the same time. Creating the process. And then when you go hear music, listen to music, you get inspired to do certain pieces. Like the Dead Serenade piece I was inspired. I saw a Dead show, and I saw Jerry in a certain light, I said, wow, that would be great, to do the skeleton head and with the hair and all, and just the moon and the shine of the blue light behind him. It just, I said that would be a great piece to do. And then I showed it to Les, and he said, yeah, let's do that on the cover. We did it as a cover piece. So things would go like, I would be thinking about a song and listen to music while I worked, and I would propose to him. And most of the time, he would take the pieces and he, put them in the magazine. Alternatively, if I see some art or something, and it's an inspiring, it also inspires. So you think of music or a song that would go with a physical drawing or painting, something like that. And playing with other people, you bring it in, and it all gels together. A lot of fun.
Seems like a lot of fun. Just saying.
Yeah.
So I tell you what, a lot of your work is for people who can go and find the early issues. It's also inside the issues themselves. I'm just gonna toss a couple covers at you. How about that one, right? That's the one. That's what
That
set
was
you in motion.
Yeah, first piece. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing, right? That's volume 2,
Mhm.
number 5. I like the I don't know. I like the lines on this. It's stylized a particular way. And did you sort of initially sort of how long did it take you? I guess that's my question.
Oh,
If you can recall.
it definitely took probably a day at least, to do that. And conception and all that, and then putting it down on paper and a couple of sketches, maybe more, maybe 2 days.
In
But
terms of your
I was a big Rick Griffin fan, and Kelly and Mouse, and Crumb. So it all came to be from those styles that I would work into, like how I worked, you know.
it is interesting because if one looks at the various covers that you created over the years,
Yeah.
all of those elements and some other ones, right, are certainly there. Hold on, let's see. What are your? I'm also curious, by the way. So, to what extent, in terms of back and forth with Les on what
Uh-huh.
the cover would be, how did that sort of relationship play out?
It was all different. It was either me coming up with something, him coming up with something, or both of us talking together about doing something. So if he had a good idea, if I had a good idea, or if he suggested something, and then I said, "How about this, and that?" And then we'd work it together, and he would say, "No, change that to this or whatever," and we would do that. Sometimes it didn't work at all. There's plenty of pieces I've done that would never made into a cover, and whether we agreed on it or not is another thing. But there's definitely a lot of artwork that's still in my bin. That's not going anywhere.
What I like about this one is there are a lot. If you look at it up close, there are a lot of little things sort of hidden and woven into the image here.
Yeah, whatever I could fit in that would be symbolic. I mean, I met Rick Griffin, and actually, the guy who introduced me to Les is a very good friend of mine, my friend Carl. I was showing at a gallery in Greenwich Village, and Rick walked in, and I walked into the place, and I saw him standing there staring at a piece of my art, and I was floored that there's Rick Griffin, you know, staring at something I did. I'm like, wow. And we went over and talked to him, and uh, we took him to Chinatown, and we ate clams, and we talked about symbolism and all the things he's done. And I'm like, yeah, it all makes sense. And a lot of artists do something in their pieces to make it personal and for people to see. Sometimes there's a meaning behind some things that are being done.
Well, here, right, we're starting to get in. I guess it's two color, but we're
Yeah,
starting
yeah, yeah,
things. Can you talk a little bit about? Obviously, that gives you a little more license, a little more room to
yeah.
do things. Can you recall as sort of the covers start to evolve what that was like for you?
Yeah, well, the magazine started doing pretty well, and he said, "Les said, let's expand and let's try let's try a couple of colors and see what we can get out of it. So, it evolved from that to this to maybe a few colors and then full color, on whatever you needed to do to make it a full color magazine. And it just, opened up everything after that. Even though I still love to do pen and ink, it's fun.
By the way, for people who are noticing, it's this is still dead relics up in the
Right.
before the full on full
Or
on
they change it
transition.
to relic.
Let's step away from covers proper for a second to
Okay.
talk about this. This is really an iconic poster of yours.
Right.
Um, how did it come out? Can you talk about how people have responded to it over the years?
Well, it started in Relics in a centerfold. I don't know whether Les or I had the idea of doing a song poster because it was done, I think, with the Rolling Stones. And he said, let's do a 50 song poster of the Grateful Dead. I said, okay. And I've done it and it was similar to this, but I said it looked kind of empty. So I expanded and did the 100 songs. It was cheap enough to do with black and white, and they could reproduce it and all. And it's the most popular thing I've done probably. There's a couple other things they've done pretty well, but I'm actually considering doing a 200 song and making it colorable, so people could actually take it and color up as like a coloring book kind of thing, making it bigger.
That seems like of the moment too. People be down for that.
Yeah, I mean, I did a couple of coloring books also, so they did really well. So I'm thinking this would be a great, because people do color it now as it is, but
Yes.
there's so much halftones that and detail that you can't. Everything looks dark. So if I rev it up a bit and do some more songs, it could be really iconic.
For what it's worth, I love the fact this is in black and white. There's something about that that seems
Yeah.
sort of timeless. I think it matches the music
Mhm.
particularly well. It allows people to sort of dig in and look in the various, in the corners. And
Yeah.
like it's a satisfying exercise just to find the 100 to begin with. But aside from that, just visually, I did this up at one point, in my life up on a wall. It's cool. It's really
I,
cool.
I can't even tell you how many people I meet that have said to me all through since '77 that they've had it on their dorm room walls. And up till today, kids, friends of mine's kids, they say, that's that guy who did that? Really? That long ago? It's pretty funny. It is pretty funny.
It's all it's
And it's
awesome.
actually, there's 103 songs in there. So it's kind of tricky that, it was like an option. If someone actually found, 100, they can probably look and find another two or three there.
Okay, well, we'll offer that up. That's like the charge to everyone out there who's checking
Yeah,
this out to find find a couple more. And this one was pretty memorable for
that
me.
was
I can
funny.
remember growing. I don't know. Can you talk about the idea for this?
Yeah, Les and I were talking about uh, how to adapt most things into a Grateful Dead mold. Like the that TV show and Vanna White doing the tiles there. Of making that an obvious Grateful Dead, term thing. And so yeah, there's a few things like that we did that were iconic, from what different walks of life, turning it into like a deadhead kind of thing. It was kind of fun.
Really, this one I've always, you know,
Yeah.
this one I always enjoyed. I like here's another cool one, right? That's a
Ah,
riff on a
yeah,
famous piece of work. Can you talk about a little bit about that one?
yeah. It was from Norman Rockwell did a piece, and we wanted to deadify it, you know. So I think originally it might have been Jerry's face in the mirror, and may have changed it to the skeleton. And actually, that's a big mistake, that whole cover, because I did it digitally, and the color separations are all wrong. So the colors are all off, you know. But it still, hit the mark. That's for sure. It's kind of funny.
That's fair. That's another to me. That's another entertainment. I recall. Well, here's a different, altogether different one that I thought was pretty memorable too, sort of back in the day. I thought it was a great way to capture, somewhat Relics, was really an important issue, but also in a really, I don't, in a way that felt like Relics. Can you talk about this
Yeah,
one?
yeah, that was pretty sad. They were busting kids like crazy at these shows. Where they didn't want the dead in town. You know, they just didn't like hippies. So they were throwing them into jail for any kind of small thing they could find on them, and it was pretty sad. Yeah, that was Tony Brown, who had that idea to do that.
I know Tony really sort of that was important to her, and she did a
Yeah.
great. I thought she did a great job of advocating at a time when people needed to advocate for
Yes.
this, like doing extended time, for just having a joint out, in your pocket outside a show, particularly considering where we are now with
Yeah.
that, and she
And
did.
and the dead would announce that they weren't going to come back to certain towns because of this. You know that they were being treated. They're treating their people like this.
Yeah,
Really
listen,
bad.
I grew up in New England, and I lost Hartford and Providence. So they came back once to Hartford, but otherwise it
Yeah.
was, and they came back eventually to Boston.
Yeah.
But for a while it was tough to see shows because all this was
Yeah.
going on.
And some of those were some of their best shows too.
Okay, I remember this one pretty well too,
Yeah, the
just because I
taper.
thought it sort of captured the flavor of
Yeah.
tape trading. I don't know. Can you
It
describe
was
the origins of this image?
it was the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow of all the greatest, dead cassette tapes, I guess, of collectors and the best shows. Which is, it's such an amazing thing that this guy started this magazine as a newsletter, and it was not even about money or anything. It's just about getting together a community of people that collected music, from a band, and it was such a big community, and it just blew up. It just expanded so much, and the ultimate thing, at the end of the rainbow, there's all their best shows, and they actually were able, before the Dead even compiled anything, that these people were actually saying, this show, do you have this show on tape, do you have that show on tape, and they would trade, for like a better show that they didn't have or whatever. So yeah, that was early on. When he started doing color, it was kind of fun.
So when they went to color, how did that impact one way or another, whatever it was you were
For
working
me,
on?
it was amazing. I could do paintings. I could throw whatever I had into it, and really make a much nicer piece than just a sketch or a drawing. It was a lot of fun, for sure.
And at that point, presumably you're also balancing a bunch of other work that you're doing in your creative life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was freelancing for all different companies, apparel companies and posters and things like that. So it was, I was getting more into the color painting mode thing, instead of just the drawing stuff, and it gave me a lot of experience in that world too. It was really good for me, that's for sure.
Again, here's another taper.
Yeah, that was also an early color print that I experimented digitally, and it worked better than the Norman Rockwell piece for sure. The colors came in, definitely better than that piece.
In terms of figuring out sort of how this was going to work digitally, what was that hurdle like for you?
It
If
was
if,
it
if
was early on, so nothing was 100% back then. I think it was like 85 or six. I started working on a computer, and I said, "This is exciting. It's a new way to work." And I was experimenting with certain things, and after a certain point, I said, "You know what? I really miss the painting stuff," and I went back to the painting stuff.
Oh, this one. So for people who don't know, you can't really see it in this. It's like sort of there's a there's like a foil texture
Yeah,
behind this,
yeah,
sort of like what comic books were doing
right.
during this era.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, what was that? Was that from your perspective? How challenging was it to deliver this piece in that context?
Actually, I didn't do it like that. They took out color, and Les had an idea to throw the glitter in to make it pretty, more interesting, I guess, than just a flat painting, you know. So I had nothing to do with it, but I said, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's kind of cool. It's definitely different. Stands out on a magazine rack, that's for sure.
I always like that as a one off, just in terms of
Uh,
dynamics. Like if they did it too many times, maybe not, but just as
yeah,
like this one off, I always thought it was really cool.
yeah, yeah,
All right, well that brings us to let's just talk about here we go.
yeah.
Um, this poster. I mean, how to come about? What went into it? What was your thought process? Whatever you'd like to say
Um,
about.
well, I try to figure out what went into the magazine from day one and what it was about. You've got the readership um, at the bottom, all the little skeletons, and the crow holding the cassette, the red, white, and blue, Grateful Dead Roses things, um, and the couple sharing, the magazine. Uh, Guy playing guitar, guy playing fiddle, so it's acoustic, electric, and all that. And the roses are behind and everything, all dead symbolic stuff, dead readership, I guess. But relics for sure. I see there's so much different music now, and actually, I think back then they were putting like Blondie on the cover and Springsteen and things like that, and they were getting complaints about it, But things are different today. You could, do all this stuff and
Yeah,
make it really encompassing.
there was like a brief period in the 80s where some of
Yeah,
that went down, and then they sort of came back around to to the core. And also during that time, there were a lot of just photo covers, right? So
yeah,
not necessarily your work for better or worse. I might say for worse, because I think it's nice to have a little bit of everything at the end of the day.
yeah. No, I agree. The covers are great. People want to see, a lot of artists that do albums or discs or whatever now. Their main shot, they want to have their photographs. Like you'll never see a piece of art, I think, on a Springsteen cover, or maybe Pearl Jam or something like that. But that's gone. When you used to buy albums, you used to get this big 12-inch piece of art, and then you'd open it up or look on the back, and there'd be all kinds of art, and you'd be playing the record and looking at it. Like the Janis Joplin cover for sure. You couldn't. There's so much in there. It just was part of the deal of the music and the art you're getting. But people want to put their image out there and see who they are, and propose that. So whatever works. But I think it's a good mix is more interesting for sure. You know.
Do love, by the way, the way you feature the cassette, which is how tapes were being traded when Relics began.
Yeah.
And to some degree still are by some folk, quite frankly. I mean, not as much, obviously not on the same level it once was, but I thought that really gets to the essence
Yeah.
of the core
Yeah.
of Relics. So I thought
Right.
that was a nice touch.
Right.
So that poster will be coming out in January. Above and beyond that, I know you do a lot of other work, and you've expanded into other mediums. Can you just talk a little bit, let people know where they can see your stuff and what you've been focusing on as of late?
Well, I have a gallery here where I live in Florida, where I have most of my work. I'm in a couple of other galleries. I work a lot now with plexiglass dimensional paintings. So I'll do the art on the plexi, and behind it there'll be an image that will go along with the frontal piece. And it's all kinds of subjects. It's not just anything that's just music or whatever. And I also rediscovered pencil work, because when I was a kid, I used to do a lot of pencil drawings. And I was starting to look on the internet and YouTube, and I saw these amazing artists that do stuff that looks like it's a photograph. And I'm like, wow, you could actually do that these days with all the materials they have. So I started delving into that, and I had some really good results with that kind of stuff too. So if you go on my website, the Kroman Gallery website, you'll see all these different things, and I try to vary. I get pegged into one thing, and someone says, "Oh, he only does pencil. Oh, he only does, the plexiglass," and then his paintings there too. But look, any good artist is going to expand and experiment with whatever they can get their hands on. You know.
Hold on, I want to share. Let me see if I can find one more that's on my mind. Going back in terms of, how about that one? Speaking of paintings.
Oh yeah, that was my Van Gogh.
Yeah, right. That's why it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's your Hendrix Van Gogh.
Uh-huh. And you know what the funny thing is? We had a lot of trouble with that because I worked from loosely a photo that Jim Marshall took, and he called Les up, and he was really angry. He wanted money and he wanted notoriety. I'm like, well, it's a pretty standard picture of Jimmy and how he used to play like that all the time. So it was it was a little problem for Les. But I thought it was a lot of fun. I was able to paint loosely, like that, and use the colors, bold colors, good palette. It was a lot of fun.
That's right. That's pretty early into Relix colored covers too. I thought
Yeah,
you did a
for
really nice
sure.
job with it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Anyhow, well, thank you, Gary. Thanks for making the time. We're really psyched that we have this new poster from you. I mean, really, you have pretty much been there from the get go. I think so much of I know what I think about Relix sort of encompasses your work over the years. If I'm just to think back in my mind over those covers that I've enjoyed so much, and so we really appreciate it. It's fun getting to talk to you, and people can go to Kroman Gallery to see everything you do.
Thank you so much. Great
Thanks,
to
Gary.
meet you. All right, take care.